19. Elvis to become a movie star, a real movie star. Sadly, by Presley's most consuming ambition was his own standards. The 33 movies he made between 1956 and 1972 never accomplished that on tie-in. He regards most of them as Presley travelogues. They all follow the same script but on a different location. However, although the critics reviled them, millions of fans relished them, and the money men reveled in them. No Presley movie was a financial disaster. Maybe one or two scraped in just over the bottom line, but the vast majority made staggering fortunes. Toward the end of his frantic film making period, during which he would sometimes churn out 3 a year, Presley resented not being taken seriously by Hollywood. His talent has never really been tapped, and Hollywood today is the poorer for it. Nobody really knows why his film career did not grow to more substantial proportions. Some close to Presley felt that Colonel Tom Parker was reluctant to take any risks with Presley's image. Others feel that Hollywood just didn't think he could handle the heavier stuff. But if artistically the movies were a drag for Presley, they provided a launching pad for a lot of fun times. For Presley and the Memphis Mafia, it was G.1. Blues, the first movie after his return from the service, that sparked the beginning of the Memphis Mafia as an entity. It was April 1960. Presley had just returned from the Fontainebleau Hotel where the Colonel had pulled off a staggering fee for him to appear on the Timex special produced by and starring Frank Sinatra. Sonny West remembers, he got $125,000 to sing 2.5 songs. He sang Fame and Fortune and Stuck on You, and then his half a song was when he harmonized a number with Sinatra. That money was the most that anyone had ever paid for 2.5 songs. Whether by design or accident, the clan had started to gather in Memphis that month. Diamond Joyce Posito, the Chicago-born recruit Presley met in the Army, was there. Presley put him on the payroll at $65 a week to be his foreman. Lovable Lamar Fike was there. He had been put on the payroll at $35 a week. Gene Smith, Presley's cousin, was put on the payroll at $35, as was Sonny. They were to join Colonel Tom Parker, Parker's assistant, Tom Diskin, and Freddie Beanstalk, a producer for Hill and Range, on a special club car, hired for $2,500, that would take them to Hollywood. Red West was already there, working with Nick Adams on The Rebel. He was to work on location in G.I. Blues as stand-in and stuntman. A huge crowd of well-wishers gathered at the Memphis station to bid farewell. Among them was Charlie Hodge, the rhythm guitarist, whom Presley had met on the boat to Germany. Sonny remembers that Charlie Hodge looked forlorn. He had got very close to Presley, and this seemed like the last goodbye. Charlie was standing on the platform and we were already on the back of the train, says Sonny. He looked downcast and sad. Just before the train pulled out, it was evident to everybody that we were leaving Charlie behind. Presley looked at Charlie and said, "Charlie, you son of a gun, what are you doing there? You want to come with us?" Charlie replied in surprise, "What do you mean? I don't even have anything with me. No luggage, no thing." Presley laughed and said, "Come on, get your ass on here. We'll get your stuff shipped out there. Get on board." Charlie's face lit up and he jumped on board. The gang was complete. Everybody hugged everybody. In the years to come, others would join the group: Jerry Schilling, Alan Fortas, Cliff Cleaves, Richard Davis, Dick Grobb, Marty Lacker. All of them at one time or another would have their flare-ups with Presley. Some would leave, only to cool down and once again return to the fold. But on that April day in 1960, the charter members of the Memphis Mafia came together. Sonny recalls fondly, "I guess you could say we were a bunch of hicks. I had a crew cut and I had a tooth missing, which got knocked out in a fight. I was a toothless, crew cut son of a bitch. There was a great warmth between us. No pettiness. Just a bunch of young guys setting out for some excitement and going to conquer the world. It was fantastic, and the guy who was most fantastic was Elvis. I had quit my job in Memphis at the Ace Appliance store and I had traded my jeans and t-shirt uniform for some suits and shirts and ties that Elvis had given me. Man, we thought we were something." The Colonel had wired ahead to all of the towns that the train was going to stop in. At each stop, the crowds were gigantic, frenzied. Presley would go to the platform at the back of the train and sign autographs while the Colonel dispensed pictures and Presley memorabilia. The fans grabbed at Presley's shoes, his legs, clutched his hands, tried to tear at his clothes, and pledged undying loyalty. The Colonel knew it would be good for Elvis to get back with the fans around him. Elvis loved it. He was being loved all over again. The 2 years away hadn't made anyone forget him. They loved him more. He had to take all the rings off his fingers, or the fans would have ripped his hands off. "That was a great ride," says Sonny. To Sonny West and the rest of the guys, Hollywood was all it was cracked up to be. "When we arrived, says Sonny. It was all a bit of a dream. I remember we stayed in the Beverly Wilshire, and in the lobby there was this shop. Myself and Jean went down there, and do you know they had a hairbrush selling for $500? When I first saw it, I honestly thought the shop was selling for $500, and, God almighty, when I realized they were selling the brush for that price, I nearly died. I asked the lady about it, and when she said that was the right price, I thought it must have belonged to Errol Flynn or some famous movie star. We really played the part. We would all dress in these dark suits, and we would drive Elvis's maroon Cadillac convertible. We all wore shades, and we would drive down Sunset Strip with the top down like we were millionaires. I'm sure if anybody had seen us, they wouldn't have believed we were boys from Memphis making $35 a week. I started to let my crew cut grow out. I used to put the grease on it and tried to train it into a Tony Curtis hairstyle. Gene Smith, man, that guy was funny. He used to wear makeup. He thought all the movie stars wore makeup all the time. He had this stuff that would make him look real tanned. He was a very funny guy. His job was to look after Elvis's kid and his clothes. But if anyone asked him what he did, he would say, "I don't do a goddamn thing. I'm Elvis Presley's cousin." The thing is, we all played up this Memphis Mafia role. But we were young kids, and who could blame us? We weren't doing nothing wrong except having a good time. When they got to Paramount Studios, they were even more overawed. Names that they had seen on the local movie marquees were all over the place. They couldn't believe what they had fallen into. Norman Tarug, the man behind the camera in a lot of Presley movies, won the respect, admiration, and friendship of all the Memphis Mafia. Among all the movie people who came in contact with the Memphis boys, Tarug seemed to have a special understanding of them, their pranks, and their dedication to Presley. When Presley and the boys first met Juliet Prowse, who starred opposite Presley in GI Blues, she seemed to put them at arm's length. She was a very cool lady, recalls Red. She had that English type accent, and at first we all thought she was a bit standoffish. Actually, she was a pretty nice chick, but I guess at first when she saw these wild men from Memphis, she probably thought, what the hell is this all about? Anyway, Elvis started to break down this coolness with his professional country boy charm. Real polite, real sincere. But, says Sonny, we weren't too convinced about his sincerity when we heard him discuss the situation later. At the time, Juliet, a sensational-looking dancer from South Africa, was going with Frank Sinatra. Many gossip columnists tipped that she would be his next wife. As pranking material, this was too much of a good thing for the boys to pass up. During breaks in shooting, Presley would always take Juliet into his dressing room. Maybe he was showing her his karate chops, muses Red, and most of the boys would hang around outside. Red West would take the opportunity to bang on the door and yell, "Hey, Elvis, quick, here comes Frank. He's on the set." At first, Presley would open the door and peek outside to see if this was true. At noon one day, the inevitable happened. Sure enough, weaving his way elegantly through the lights, cameras, and wires came Frank Sinatra. As usual, he looked as if he had just stepped out of a tailor shop. He wore a flat-top Panama hat with a colored bandana around it, and he was heading toward the dressing room. Red nearly swallowed his Adam's apple. "Hey, Elvis, here comes Frank. I mean it, man. He's on the set." He banged on the door, but the only response he got from Presley was, "Ah, Red, fuck you." Sonny remembers Sinatra as being very dapper and very cool. He walked directly to the dressing room. The Memphis boys held their breath. Sinatra knocked quietly on the door, and Presley emerged, just as cool. Sinatra stepped into the dressing room and remained there for about 10 minutes, presumably passing the time of day. Afterwards, recalls Sonny, Elvis laughed about it. He said, "Goddamn, man, the one time you guys banged on the door and there he was." It was Frank Sinatra. For some time during the filming and for a time afterwards, Presley dated Juliet Prowse. Nothing came of the wedding to Frank Sinatra. The boys remember that Elvis was dating Tuesday Weld at the same time. He was beginning to get the hang of how they did things in Hollywood. The Memphis Mafia, although some of the press described them as gophers or hangers on, all had jobs to perform when they were around Presley. Joe Esposito was extremely efficient as a foreman, particularly on movies, where he would organize all the schedules, call sheets, and the scripting for Presley. Red would often help out with the music. He and Sonny worked stunts, and did stand-ins. Gene Smith looked after Presley's wardrobe as if it were his own. Lamar Fike would involve himself in transport, and Charlie Hutch would help out at odd jobs and on the music. During GI Blues, Sonny's main task was to work as Presley's karate dummy. He really started getting into it, and he would like to show off this new art. "I would act as the fall guy. That meant I would do the falling for his blows, and that meant anywhere, in a hotel room, dressing room, wooden floor or concrete floor. Man, there were days I ached, but I got to admit it was fun. Man, yes, man, Karate in those days was a mystery art to the Memphis boys. Red and Sonny remember that Presley was in perfect physical condition. Sonny relates, "Hell, he was doing it right, beautiful condition, and he was as handsome as you could imagine." Presley did a little karate in the fight scenes, Red remembers, and he was very impressive, which was certainly attributable to his fitness, although he wasn't slowed down any by the pills that he and the boys were popping. Soon after GI Blues, Presley swung into Flaming Star, in which he played a half-breed Indian caught between the white settlers and the Kiowas in a bloody Indian uprising. Presley was like a one-man army, knocking people unconscious, shooting others and stabbing the rest. One of the Indians he stabbed was played by Red West. Hollywood was beginning to get an idea of what it was going to be like on a Presley movie. He might not win an Oscar, but he was going to have fun. "Hell, man," says Red, "we were into everything. We were doing karate demonstrations all over the studio, throwing each other around, busting boards with our hands, partying at night in the house he rented on Perugia Way. He was screwing himself silly, and when we weren't horseplaying on set, we were playing football in a little park at Beverly Glen." Presley got the respect of the Wranglers on that movie where he insisted on riding a maverick horse himself. If producer Weisbert had developed an ulcer, it would have been understandable. Elvis's chances of injury were increased still further by the half-dozen games of football he played on the weekends. Red remembers meeting Robert Conrad, Ty Hardin, Ricky Nelson, Kent McCord, David Parks and Gary Lockwood on the football field, and also Pat Boone, who loved to play with the boys. Whenever Pat came down to play, however, says Red, his wife was always 10 minutes behind him and she would drag his ass off the field. Shirley was her name, a sweet lady, but she always thought of something for Pat to do whenever he played with us. I don't think she was too keen on him playing with us, although he loved it. All these actors, a lot of them surprised me, especially Bob Conrad and Gary Lockwood. None of them was scared of getting their faces messed up. They were tough. The Memphis Mafia expanded or contracted, depending on what good old boy took Presley's fancy or who dropped in from Memphis. But at this stage something cast a pall over the boys. There was a thief in their midst. Some money was missing from Joe Esposito's room, and a diamond wristwatch was missing from Presley's jewel box. "It was a difficult time for me," says Sonny, "because I had been looking after his jewel box, and somehow I felt the finger of suspicion pointed at me." Elvis made it clear he couldn't tolerate a thief in his midst and I couldn't blame him. "It was a bad scene, and at one stage I thought that Elvis was going to drop me from the crowd." Through an ingenious idea of the Colonel's, the thief was discovered, and Sonny was relieved of any suspicion. Meanwhile, thieves notwithstanding, the money was piling up in Presley's bank account. The GI Blues album was a million seller, and the singles from it broke all sales records. But before Presley, or the Colonel, for that matter, had time to count their money, Presley was back before the cameras for his third movie in 1960, Wild in the Country. Glenn Tyler, played by Presley, gets into a fight with his drunken brother. The brother was Red West, and once again, he knocks me on my ass, says Red with a laugh. "I ended up on my back in most of Elvis's movies. Can't remember when I did win a fight." Presley sang Lonely Man. "I slipped, I stumbled, I fell, wild in the country, and in my way." Red West got knocked on his backside. Sonny West played a small part in the movie, and Presley and the Colonel made another fortune from the record releases as well as the movie fee. The only unhappy note was that Elvis had some very ugly boils on his rear end during the filming. The movie broke habit and got drunk twice. Once to ease the pain was shot in the Napa wine growing district, and Presley of the boils, and another time when he had to play a tipsy scene with Tuesday Weld. Both thought they would sacrifice a little sobriety for the sake of making the scene more realistic. Hope Lang heard that Presley was suffering, and she appeared at his motel room one day. Sonny recalls that Presley was lying naked on his stomach with hot wash clothes on his rear end and a sheet covering him. She came in and said hi to him and wanted to know what was wrong. He told her, and damn if she didn't lift up the sheet and say, "Where?" Elvis was as embarrassed as hell and grabbed for the sheet to cover himself. He yelled out, "Whoa, there." He was still pretty shy about things like that, but it was obvious that Hope Lang was a grown woman who was not trying to sneak a peek. She was genuinely concerned. So he showed her his boils on his butt when he realized that she was concerned, and she looked and said, "My goodness." But it was funny to see his first reaction. He had a bit of a whine in him and his inhibitions were gone, but he was still a country boy at heart. At that time, Presley was going with a very pretty wardrobe girl called Nancy Sharp from Street Louis. Missouri. This girl, says Sonny, was very talented, very intelligent, and Elvis was so serious about her that he actually went to Missouri to meet her parents. Anyway, this leads up to the first time I ever saw Elvis pull a gun. We convinced Elvis to go to San Francisco for a break. We took the big white 1960 Cadillac he had bought, and he was sitting with Nancy in the back propped up on pillows. We're driving along the X Pressway and a car pulls up on the right side of us and there were a lot of young guys in it and they started giving us the finger. I don't think they saw Elvis. They big fancy were just doing it because we were driving a car. Anyway, Elvis tells me to catch up with them and I do. Suddenly he pulls down the rear window and he pulls out this Derringer and points it right at the driver's head. I looked at it in shock. I didn't think he was going to shoot the guy, but it was a hell of a shock. Anyway, those guys just zoomed off the next ramp. Elvis then said, "That will teach that son of a bitch not to give anyone the finger because someone is driving a big car." By 1961, when Presley went before the cameras to shoot Blue Hawaii, he had accomplished most men's dreams. He had a beautiful, fresh schoolgirl in Memphis named Priscilla Bewley, who was cut off from the action in Hollywood but was always waiting faithfully for him in Memphis. He was a millionaire. He traveled deluxe. He was surrounded by a group of the most dedicated men this side of the CIA, and had more action with the ladies on movie locations and parties at his various houses than any four men could handle. Blue Hawaii made buckets of money for everyone. The soundtrack recording alone sold over $6.5 million worth of long-playing records. The title song was another million seller. Sonny has special memories at Blue Hawaii for two reasons. He was involved in a drunken real-life comedy scene, and it led to a rupture between him and Presley. The movie itself was the first to become known as the Presley-style beach movie. Again, a thin plot, exotic locations and a legion of Hollywood bit-part actresses in extravagant musical scenes. It was directed by Norman Taurog, which added to the fun because he indulged the Memphis Mafia in their roughhouse behavior. "We were doing some shooting on an outer island in Kauai," says Sonny. "It was beautiful. We were all into the karate thing and Elvis and Red are breaking boards all over the beach with their hands. I don't think there was a piece of driftwood on that beach that wasn't cut in two. Anyway, there was not a great deal to do where we were. The meals were served in this big dining room, which was open on one side with a lagoon running almost alongside it. Across the sidewalk from the dining room, there was a bar. One night while Elvis and the boys were eating dinner, I skipped dinner and walked across to the bar. I started talking to a couple of girls, trying to promote them with my best country boy act. In the end all I did was succeed in getting pretty drunk on too many Mai Tais. Man, they were dynamite. Anyway, I walked the girls back to their room and was walking back to the dining room bar complex when I saw something that really grabbed me. There was this pretty little bridge across the lagoon. Now the bridge faced the open dining room. On this bridge there was a very attractive man and woman and they were singing the Hawaiian wedding song. Well, this grabbed me. Man, just two lovers singing this song on a bridge in the middle of this beautiful island. I thought that was fantastic. So I walked up the bridge and I put my arms around both their shoulders, wanting to be a part of this wonderful scene. I sang along with them and they were beautiful singers. Now, as a singer, I'm a good football player. I can't sing worth a damn. But they went along with it and I'm just singing along in this beautiful scene. 99. What Sonny didn't know, was not capable of knowing because of his overconsumption of Mai Tais, was that the couple singing on the bridge were part of the floor show entertaining the diners. Oblivious to the screams of laughter from the diners, Sonny just kept on singing. Presley and all the boys were in stitches, realizing that he had crashed the floor show unwittingly. I didn't remember too much about it, says Sonny. I do remember that a lot of people came out laughing at me and this one woman who stormed up to me, mad as hell, and said, "Young man, you have ruined my 15th wedding anniversary." Despite Presley's amusement at the scene, he told Joe Esposito and Red West to keep Sonny away from his table. He didn't want anybody to know that the Memphis minstrel was a member of his party. Red, under orders, gently took Sonny, singing merrily, to his bed. The next day, according to Sonny, the freeze set in from Presley. He gave me the cold shoulder, and he is telling all the crew what I had done as if it was a big crime instead of something that was quite amusing. I started to think that he was a pretty phony bastard. On one hand he is laughing his head off and on the other he gives me the freeze. He was on my ass for the rest of the movie and sort of kept me at a distance. The culmination came when the boys all got back to the mainland, at Presley's house on Perugia Way, the one that had been owned by the Shah of Iran. One night we are up at the house, says Sonny, and there is Tuesday welled up there and this girlfriend of hers called Kay. Well, Elvis was going with Tuesday, so I started to try to promote this Kay, a nice looking girl. We had all been drinking a bit, so had Elvis. Alan Fortas was up at the house and so was Gene Smith. Tuesday and Elvis are on the couch and I am talking to this girl, Kay. Elvis leans over and kisses her and says, "You're really cute." Well, I knew that was the end of me trying to score with this chick, because whatever Elvis wants in the way of women, he gets. No matter if you're trying to score. He has Tuesday there and he wants this girl, too. Later on he comes over and really plans a kiss on her. So I go over to the corner of the room and start talking to Gene. I said something like, "If you had your choice, Gene, which girl would you go for?" And he says, "Tuesday. Man, she's beautiful." And she was, really pretty. 99. Presley couldn't hear what Sonny said, but for some reason he got it into his head that Sonny was talking disparagingly about him. He stopped kissing and cuddling the girl and said, "What did you say, Sonny?" Sonny was mystified. He didn't know what Elvis was talking about. Again. "God damn it, you said something about me and I want to know what it was." Sonny flushed with embarrassment. He didn't know what to say. He didn't want to have to admit in front of the girls that he was discussing which girl was more attractive. Presley got up and walked over to Sonny, reached for a bottle of Coke, and said, "Tell me or I'll break your goddamn head open with this bottle." Sonny stared long and hard at Presley. "You're not going to hit me with no bottle. I've had enough of this shit. I quit." Presley got angrier. "You can't quit. I fire you." Sonny started angrily for the door. Presley walked in front of him and they started shouting at each other. "Then," said Sonny, "he drew back and punched me in the face. I didn't move. I didn't even feel the blow. But I could feel the tears of emotion coming out of my eyes. And I said quietly, 'I didn't think you could do that to me.'" 99. When Sonny went to his room and started to pack, Presley followed him, obviously repentant. Tuesday, Wild came up to Sonny and apologized for bringing the girl to the house in the first place, since it caused the trouble and cost him his job. Presley asked Sonny if he had any money and handed him $200. He added there would be more coming from his father, Vernon Presley. Now Presley seemed to have regretted what he had done. But it wasn't in him to apologize. He wanted to know where Sonny was going to live and what he was going to do. Sonny now feels that Presley didn't want him to go. He knew he had been in the wrong. Victim of an insane temper made worse by booze. But Sonny was firm. "I told you, I quit and I'm getting out." Presley followed Sonny to his car with his luggage. It was a scene that was to typify Presley's behavior over the years. A blind rage, then striking out at someone he loves, followed him up almost hoggy. Perhaps he felt his apology came in the form of exotic gifts. And, of course, there were many of those. 2 weeks later, the studio shooting for Blue Hawaii was being finished and Sonny went over to the set at Paramount. The guards didn't know that he was no longer working for Presley, and they waved him through. As was the custom when Presley put someone in cold storage, the rest of the boys followed suit. They were cool to him. I know about it because I admit that when one of the other guys had a flare up with Elvis, I did the same thing. If you're on the outer with Elvis, then everybody puts you on the outer. Elvis came off the set and sort of slowed down when he came up to me. He gave me a big hello and Sonny replied, "Hi, boss, how you doing?" Presley motioned to Sonny to come into his portable dressing room. Joe Esposito was there, and Presley asked Joe for them to be left alone. Presley looked at Sonny in the dressing room mirror and started to laugh. "Sonny, you son of a bitch." Sonny started to laugh, too. "Me, a son of a bitch?" he said. "It wouldn't have happened if you hadn't been drinking." They both broke up laughing. Presley gave Sonny the opening to ask for his job back, but Sonny didn't bite. "What do you want to do, Sonny?" Sonny replied, "Well, I was thinking of hanging around and trying to get some work in the movies, but I know it's pretty hard." Presley just said, "All right, okay." The next thing Sonny knew was that Presley had got him in the Screen Extras Guild. There was a long list of people trying to get in the union, but Elvis, being who he was, just fixed it straight away. He went out of his way to do a favor for me even though we had our flare up. He didn't say he was sorry, but that was his way of apologizing, I guess. Sonny stayed in Hollywood doing odd work on the movies while Presley and the Memphis Mafia, including Red West, took off for Florida to do the 1962 release, Follow the Dream. It pretty much followed the same pattern, says Red. Priscilla was in Memphis. Elvis dated his leading lady and I, as usual, ended up in the movie getting knocked on my ass. With the shooting of Kid Galahad that same year, Sonny returned to the Memphis Mafia full member in good standing. He acted as Presley's karate dummy during the filming. In Palm Springs, Red did some scenes in the boxing ring with Presley and took the usual falls. He also got a damaged eye when Presley poked a thumb in his face during one scene. It was the first time that Sonny and Red had met Charles Bronson, whom they liked, both for his quiet dignity and for the masterly performance he gave. But, recalls Sonny, Elvis just didn't go for him. Oddly enough, the rift between them was caused by Presley's incessant desire to impress everyone with his karate. Today Bronson is an accomplished karate expert, but the boys remember that in those days he wasn't too impressed with Presley's physical performances between takes. 99. Sonny recalls, he was a very quiet kind of guy, a loner, and he just didn't think Elvis was that big a deal. Elvis hated this and he was always putting him down. He used to call him a muscle-bound smart aleck and a muscle-bound ape. Just never stopped putting him down, although I never heard Bronson knock Elvis. Watching the movie, however, one would suspect there was a tremendous rapport between the two. which the West Boys attribute to Bronson's sterling professionalism. Both Sonny and Red took a shine to Gig young, too. Red relates. He was a funny dude. He was married to Elizabeth Montgomery at the time and she was a real looker. Gig had a great sense of humor, just dry as a twig, very funny. I remember one time when Gig was having a few drinks and Elvis came up to him as he was looking at Elizabeth dancing in the hotel. Elvis said, "Man, I have a new Rolls Royce. I'll trade you for her." Gig smiled quietly, looked up from his drink and said, "Not bad. The Rolls Royce is a newer model." When things got quiet on the set, comic relief was provided by the latter, Deputy Barnum, Colonel Tom Parker. Sonny recalls, he had a thing where he would hypnotize me and get me to do crazy things. Now, I wasn't in a trance and I knew what I was doing, but I did them just the same. Some really nutty things that always had people in stitches. I would just do whatever he told me. I was hypnotized. Now there was this director, Phil Carlson, who was very accomplished. He was directing Kid Galahad, and the Colonel just hypnotized me in front of the crew to go up and start abusing Carlson. I was an extra on the movie, and what do extras know about directing? Well, under the Colonel's hypnosis, I knew a lot about directing. I went straight up to Mr. Carlson and started ranting and raving to him that this was the worst picture I had ever been associated with, that he was an incompetent director and the whole production was a disgrace. Well, Mr. Carlson looks at me long and hard. He hardly knew me. And here I am telling him he doesn't know what he is doing. He is looking at me like I've gone mad. His first assistant turns to the Colonel and says, "Hey, who is this guy? Who in the hell does he think he is?" Well, the crew, the Colonel and Elvis are dying laughing. Then the Colonel snaps me out of the hypnosis and I go about my work as quiet and polite could be. Mr. Carlson really thought he had a nutcase on his hands until he learned about the power of the Colonel's hypnosis. As of, Sonny and Red recall that the Colonel would often do mass hypnosis on the Memphis Mafia. He would make us all get down on all fours and tell us that we were dogs. And he would have us barking and yelping like dogs and snapping at each other. The people who saw this performance were convinced all the Memphis boys were insane. Then on our command, he would tell us to attack one dog and that dog would be Lamar and we would be all over him, biting and yelping. I know it sounds kind of nutty, but it was lots of crazy fun. That Colonel could be a very funny dude. Zero true to form. Presley dated his leading lady, Joan Blackman. Priscilla remained in Memphis and Red assumed his usual position in Elvis's movies on his back. The soundtrack included the smash hits King of the Whole Wide World, This Is Living, Home Is Where the Heart Is, and I Got Lucky. The money continued to roll in. Zero. As the money rolled in, however, so did the boredom. By 1962, Presley had made 6 movies in 2 years. Most of Hollywood's golden talent had not made that many in 10 years, and it had become evident to Presley that he would never realize his ambition to become a true actor, in the real sense of the word. Around this time, after just shooting a scene, Presley was heard saying, "I must read the script one day." Both Sonny and Red point out that Presley, like most talents, always needed a challenge. Red recalls, he would always say to me, "Why in the hell do they keep on giving me lousy scripts?" He would complain and complain, but the scripts never got better. The money got better, but the scripts didn't. The point is that I know how talented the man can be when he has a challenge. In the early days of his recording, he would cut an album in 2 nights, and that may be 12 or 14 songs. He was fantastic. He really knew his stuff. Toward the end, when we were doing Elvis at home in 1976, he couldn't give a damn. He would use any excuse to hold up recording or just goof off. By 1962, when the boredom set in, he started on those big spending sprees. He would get whacked out on uppers and then just spend a fortune to end the boredom. Presley decided that if as an actor he wasn't going to be taken seriously, he would not be concerned about taking life too seriously, either. Sonny, Red and the boys would always be there to help cut up the boredom with their antics and pranks. The horseplay was the only thing that kept Presley in front of the camera. Sonny relates, "I wish we had a full-length documentary on the way we all carried on at these locations. It would be a heck of a comedy." Predictably for a man of Presley's good looks, he was sought after not only by females, but also by males. Red and Sonny recall several instances in fight scenes, when there was a full-scale brawl involving a dozen or more people. Presley would whisper to the boys, "Man, somebody cover my back, there is someone grabbing my ass." As devoted a woman chaser as he was, Presley would run 100 miles from a homosexual, which posed some difficulty because Hollywood is full of them. 99. Running away from them was one thing, but Sonny and Red recall a time in 1962 when a young man who had designs on Presley actually blew several scenes. Presley was making fun in Acapulco, but he didn't go to Acapulco on location because of a Mexican newspaper story that wrongly quoted him as saying disparaging things about the Mexicans. To send him there was considered unsafe. In a scene shot in Hollywood on the Paramount lot, Presley emerges triumphantly from the sea. There were, Red says, about 6 guys carrying him aloft on their shoulders in a sort of victory march. Now the cameras are rolling, and every time the scene is halfway through, Elvis blows it because he is wiggling around. Finally Presley came over to the boys and said, "There is a fag in that bunch. Every time they pick me up, one of them 6 guys grabs me by the balls." In the end, says Sonny, assistant director Mickey Moore spotted the guy. He was mad at this guy blowing the scene. Mickey wanted to blow the guy off the set, but he kept his cool. He just told this fag quietly that there were too many people in the scene. We, of course, near died laughing. Elvis wasn't as amused. He was very upset at being handled in a most intimate way by this fag. Despite his healthy appetite for girls, the West boys recall that there was one young actress of whom Presley was terrified. Sonny recalls, he was doing a lot of screwing around, but this one chick, man, she really wanted a piece of him. Very persistent, she was. Anyway, we thought it was a bit of a joke, but Elvis very seriously said, "Man, I don't want to be left in a room alone with her. I want you guys to hang around," and he was serious. The girl looked like she was going to eat him alive. Kissing Cousins, which followed Fun in Acapulco, was shot in the mountains outside Los Angeles. One of the mountains, Big Bear, was almost Presley's graveyard. Presley had bought a luxury Winnebago mobile trailer. It was like a moving palace. After the shooting was completed, Presley, Joe Esposito and the personal hairdresser, Larry Geller, were driving down Big Bear. The road down was a narrow winding track with a sheer drop on one side. The trailer was curving slowly down the road, with Presley at the wheel. When the brakes gave out, as the Winnebago gathered speed, it almost crashed into the car ahead, which carried some members of the film crew. Presley frantically tooted his horn, but the trail was too narrow for him to pass, and the car had to accelerate madly to keep in front of the giant lumbering vehicle behind. Red recalls, "I wasn't in it at the time, but apparently it was really touch and go. Elvis had to use the gears to get to the bottom of Big Bear, and I guess it was a miracle he didn't go over the side. He finally got to the bottom and kept running with the trailer until it just slowed to a stop." If Presley had not been the excellent driver he is, Kissing Cousins most surely would have been his last movie. The next film, Viva Las Vegas, was when Presley met Anne Margaret. It wasn't long before he was seen in public many times with her, and the gossip columns churned out a raft of stories that Anne Margaret might be the next Mrs. Presley. Undoubtedly there was a special warmth between the two, and the West boys remember that she was always at the Presley house on Perugia Way in Hollywood. "She was a fantastic chick," says Sonny, "pretty but also very easygoing. She got on great with the guys and Elvis really dug her." The gossip column items did very little to make Presley's life any easier with Priscilla Bewley, who was still closeted away in Memphis. Despite Presley's obvious attraction to Anne Margaret, she was also the object of his professional jealousy. A member of the direction staff, a man who had worked with Anne Margaret in a previous movie and who dated her, was very much in love with her. He had a lot to do with the photography, and Sonny recalls that he was so smitten by Anne Margaret that he virtually cut Presley out of the camera angles. He was shooting over Elvis's shoulder and getting close-ups of Anne Margaret. Now Anne Margaret had nothing to do with it. "It wasn't her fault," says Sonny. "It's just that he was favoring her so much with the camera angles. He was trying to do anything to get her to like him." Red recalls, "It was the first time I heard Elvis talk about camera angles, but after seeing the rushes he would complain bitterly to us that the son of a bitch was trying to cut him out of the picture. And he was right." It came to an end when Presley's complaint reached the ears of the Colonel. The big guns came in. In Viva Las Vegas, Presley really came alive. Although the script was as unchallenging as all the others, he worked extremely well with Anne Margaret, both in singing and dancing. Undoubtedly they presented special magic on screen. Sonny and Red had tiny parts, and Red wrote a song for the soundtrack, "If You Think I Don't Need You." Presley sang the Ray Charles hit, "What Did I Say?" which was a top seller. The studio guitarist who did the soundtrack with Presley was a young man named Glenn Campbell. Roustabout, a 1964 release, was directed by John Ridge, who, the West boys felt, had a decided intolerance for the antics of the Memphis Mafia. Elvis didn't have much of a rapport with Mr. Ridge, and somehow when he directed, the Memphis boys seemed to get the freeze from him, says Sonny. "It's not that he didn't like us, I just guess he thought we were not a necessary part of the movie making." Elvis was convinced that Mr. Ridge didn't have the right temperament to handle people like us. However, when Presley first met Barbara Stanwyck, he was the one who showed a lack of temperament. Elvis was a little bit late and Miss Stanwyck was already on the set waiting, recalls Sonny. Now Mickey Moore, the assistant director, looked at his watch and commented on it. For some reason Presley thought it was the veteran actress Miss Stanwyck who had complained. He said, "I don't give a damn if the big star Barbara Stanwyck is waiting for me. I'll get here when I'm good and ready." Miss Stanwyck, whom all the cast called Missy, did not take up the challenge and get offended. She was a great lady, Sonny says, and in the end a real rapport developed between her and Elvis. By 1965, Presley was desperate to break the same old script mold, but Colonel Tom was just as determined not to fool around with his image. 10 years earlier, he had promised Presley he would be richer than his wildest dreams. The Colonel had kept his promise, but Presley had to pay the price. If he wanted to stay a millionaire, he had to go along with the Colonel's plans. In his next movie, Girl Happy, Presley was relentless in his pursuit of Shelley Fabre, one of the romantic interests in the film. He would be trying to promote her all day on location, says Sonny, but she just wasn't interested. She was going with Lou Adler, the man who went on to become a big record producer. It was a blow to Elvis's ego that he couldn't get to her, but she was very faithful. When she did marry Lou a little later, Elvis said, she had to go and get married because she knew she wouldn't be able to go through another movie resisting me. It really was an ego thing with him. Presley consoled himself for his failure to get Miss Fabre to go out with him by dating Marianne Mobley. Next came Tickle Me. Presley's boredom now manifested itself in his buying 10 motorbikes. While the boys had a ball, the neighbors at the Presley household on Perugia Way were outraged. The Memphis Mafia was one thing, but the Memphis Mafia as Hell's Angels was another. Presley took his motorbike affair seriously and dressed accordingly, decked out a la Marlon Brando complete with black leather, sunglasses and yachting cap. The film had hardly cleared the cutting room when Presley was doing Harem, Scare Him, in which he played a Rudolph Valentino style movie star caught up in exotic Middle Eastern intrigue. Although his physical features bear little resemblance to the great Valentino, his manner and dash on screen capture all the excitement of a truly enchanting heartthrob. Red felt that in some scenes, despite corny scripting, Presley really excelled himself. He proved to me beyond any doubt that he had that certain presence that could bring out emotions in the audience. 99. Presley was causing plenty of emotion in his off-screen life, as well. Priscilla Bewley had tired of her role as the captive princess of Graceland and was coming to Hollywood more and more and visiting the sites of Presley's movies, which made the star very uneasy. By the end of 1965 she had given notice to Presley that she was not going to spend the rest of her life imprisoned in a Memphis palace. She had moved into the Presley Hollywood headquarters, which were now at Rocket Place in Bel Air. The boys were witness to the Priscilla struggle of wills. Priscilla very much wanted to get married and Presley, while very much in love with her, was not prepared to sacrifice his enviable bachelor status. While Elvis was mulling over his problems, Colonel Tom Parker swept him into Paradise Hawaiian Style, a movie that placed Presley once again amid the, at least artistically, although the box office weight. It was the first time Presley had ever had that problem. Despite the activity before the cameras and despite the handfuls of uppers he was taking to keep him going, Presley had just begun ever so slightly to have his first experience with downers, yellow jackets, Succottles. Although he took them sparingly, compared with later years, he would pop them occasionally and sleep for many hours on end. This perhaps was triggered by his depression about the standard of work he was being asked to do. In any case, combining the pills with an insane diet of banana and peanut butter sandwiches fried in half an inch of melted butter did not help things. By 1966, Presley, having lost any real interest in the movies he was doing, had started to get interested in philosophy, religion and books. During the filming of Frankie and Johnny, he broke with tradition by not dating his co-star Donna Douglas. Instead, Presley took a genuine intellectual interest in her. Sonny recalls, she was quite religious and she talked a lot of sense. Elvis would talk to her and he started to get interested in books. He always was quite self-conscious over the fact that he was not well read. From about there on in he really started getting into books, all kinds, religion, the occult, the meaning of words, everything. So instead of dating, they just sort of talked books and religion. At the same time that Frankie and Johnny was being shot, Robert Mitchum and Shirley MacLaine were making Seesaw. Mitchum visited Presley on the set and offered him a starring role in a film property he owned called Thunder Road. He saw in Presley what apparently a lot of Hollywood film executives failed to see, and he thought Presley would develop into a first-class serious actor if he had meatier roles to play. Either the front money wasn't tasty enough for the Colonel, or he thought it would have broken too much with the Presley tradition. In any case, Presley passed up the chance. The movie was a big success. An easy come, easy go. Presley hit back at director John Rich. Sonny recalls the confrontation. It was a thing that sort of started where Mr. Rich was trying to compete with Elvis and one of the actors, Pat Harrington, who Elvis really liked, for being the star of the set. Mr. Rich would tell jokes, stories and anecdotes and try to be funny, but we didn't think he was all that amusing. Elvis would tell a story and Pat Harrington would tell a story and it was hilarious. They were both born storytellers. The chemistry between Elvis and Rich didn't work. Well, one day, we had been fooling around and dying laughing and Elvis is in this scene and every time he looks at me or Red he bursts out laughing and blows the scene. Well, we cover our faces and try not to spoil things but again, Elvis just looks at us and again breaks up. Now Mr. Rich is getting mad and he yells out, "Okay, all you guys off the set." He was ordering us off the set. Elvis suddenly gets serious and says, "Now, just a minute, we are doing these movies because it's supposed to be fun. Nothing more. Now when they cease to be fun, then we'll cease to do them." He was just addressing nobody in particular but it was actually directed at Mr. Rich. Elvis was mad. He wasn't going to be pushed around anymore on these silly movies. Anyway, he won the point because we didn't get off the set. Presley was at the height of his car buying spree and during that filming he gave Pat Harrington a maroon Cadillac, which totally blew his mind. That was the last time Presley worked on a Hal Wallace production. Presley was grateful to Wallace for his generosity and the money that he made working for him. But one thing stuck in Presley's mind. Blue Hawaii grossed $11 million. Presley believed it was that money that financed Hal Wallace's classic movie Beckett, starring Peter O'Toole and Richard Burton. Presley felt he had been slighted. It was his movie that got that kind of money. Yet he wasn't good enough to play in anything but beach and racing car films. By 1967, Presley had calmed down his womanizing. Priscilla was seen more and more in his company. By this time she was often on the set, so his style was considerably cramped women. Wise, but the usual pranks and horseplay on location didn't stop. Red West remembers that there was so much playing around on Clambake that when Stay Away Joe began, a memo came down from the MGM top office warning us about our behavior. We thought it was a bit silly for them to take us so seriously. We sure did cut up on Clambake, but I don't think we held up Pro Duke Tide any. We didn't cost anybody any money. There were pie throwings, firecracker fights, and water bombardments. In one scene, Red remembers, Bill Bixby was before the cameras, which were rolling, and Elvis just walked right into the scene and hit him with a cream pie. Bill followed this up in another scene with some thing that really broke us up. There was a girl in this scene who had been a dancer. She wore a two-piece swimsuit. As the cameras were rolling, he simply undid her halter and her top fell off and these giant boobs fell out. The camera got it all. Up till that time, Arthur Nadell hadn't been hit. I think he felt a bit left out of it. So on the last day of shooting he came dressed in a raincoat and rain hat, virtually inviting us to hit him. We didn't. But that night as we had the end of movie party, he changed into a suit. After the party, he was going to a PTA meeting. Well, we all made a little speech about how we loved him and what a great guy he was to work with and what a great artist he was. Well, he gets choked up and begins to say thanks and that's when we hit him with a pie right in the face. At last he got the pie he wanted, but he was fully dressed. At one stage, Colonel Tom Parker must have sensed Presley's disaffection for the kind of work he was doing, although he was being miserable all the way to the bank. As a gesture, or perhaps as a gift of appreciation for Presley's fortitude in bearing the junk he was being served up, the Colonel gave him a black Lincoln limousine. Presley squeezed out 6 more movies in the next 2 years before deciding he wanted to perform again in front of real live people. Into 1966, he started taking downers more heavily, says Sonny, gradually at first, but he started heavy into them more and more as he got more and more bored. Around about that time, he fell very badly in the bathroom and hit his head. He got a concussion and he lost his equilibrium for a while. It was a real bad fall. He said he slept, but he had been heavy into yellow jackets and circonals. He was half asleep when he had that fall. He would go through periods where he would look after himself, and man, he would look like a Greek god. But then he would lapse back into popping the downers where the lapses got gradually closer and closer together. By the early 70s, the only thing that would keep him straight was if he had a challenge. Then he would be the old Elvis again. He needs a challenge more than anyone I know.